notes here. Okay, so welcome to the medical students who are joining us for our first ever Texas themed panel. COVID recruitment is definitely making us think differently about the way we approach this, but some of this was actually Tyler and Maha's idea, which was that they said kind of when they were down there, they didn't know a whole lot about Christ or Chicago or training up here in general. And so they thought it would be valuable to talk a bit more specifically about it and kind of the journey back to Texas. A lot of the fear, I think, from some people is once you leave Texas, it's hard to get back for jobs, or vice versa. Like Tyler was saying, when you're applying from Texas, sometimes people are nervous to interview because they think that you don't want to leave Texas. So kind of a two-way street. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. Before we get started, I'm just going to do a quick intro on the program, like a couple of slides for those of you who are maybe not super familiar. And then we'll open it up to kind of discussion with our panelists. All right, we don't have to read that, but that's our mission statement. So we always start with talking about kind of the 4 core beliefs or tenets at the program. And this is something that hasn't changed since Shola or Braden or anybody else was there. But at our core, and first and foremost, we think the most important thing you can do in a residency program is to train experts, clinicians, and emergency physicians. And so kind of no matter where you go afterwards, the ability to practice at a high level independently in any situation will always suit you well. The second thing is we value wellness and support. We really emphasize individual career preparation, basically tailoring your curriculum and your training to whatever it is that you may want to pursue afterwards. And then we value diversity and inclusion. And so I'm going to do one slide on just each of those. And so in terms of training expert clinicians and physicians, kind of the most important or unique thing about Christ is we have this one-to-one faculty to resident teaching ratio. And so what that means is each day when you show up for your shift, like Saturday when Tyler shows up to work with me at 6A, we're assigned a color and a team, and we sit next to each other and we sort of see everything together. He staffs everything with me. And so there's none of that hierarchy of like a resident presenting to a senior, presenting to a fellow. It's kind of one-to-one the entire time. And that's a big commitment from advocates because it means, having a lot of attendings in the house at all times. And so over 150 faculty hours per day, which is pretty incredible. But that allows us to have what we call our kind of atypical graduated responsibility, which is that, you've always got somebody there with you. And so whatever procedure comes in on day one, whether that's a central line intubation, a chest tube, that's yours when you're an intern. There's nobody there stealing it from you. And typically about halfway through your second year, the residents start giving their procedures away to the med students, which is part of the reason why they like rotating so much with us. Give me one second, I'm just gonna let a couple more people in. All right. Wellness and support is sort of the second really important tenet at our institution. And so, residency is not easy. It can be a tough 3 years, especially when you're in a really busy and acute environment. And so we always emphasize kind of balance and wellness, and that manifests in a variety of different ways. There's a picture here from our resident retreats that we do every year that didn't exist when Braden or Shola was there. So typically we get away to a beach in Michigan every year to kind of hang and recharge. This year was a little bit different with COVID, but we still got our retreat off, even though it was not in its usual location. The mentoring that's provided, kind of the way that we structure shifts and requests for things like weddings and the important things in life, we really emphasize that balance throughout all of the residency. And then let me just add a couple more people, one sec. Okay. And then that third tenet is career preparation or preparedness. And so, one of our goals is we want to train residents who can practice in any environment and go down any path, whether that's academics, community, fellowship, whatever it may be. And we always throw up the slide of the previous year's class when we're going through this, because I think it's the best way to give examples of this. And so as I move through here, you'll see each of them has a role, as all of our seniors do. They're the resident director of something, and that kind of allows them to build their CV for the future. And so Kishi, for example, was a chief resident, and he ultimately became the ultrasound fellow this year. Katie Johns was the resident director of wellness, but always had an interest in sports medicine and was involved with the marathons, and now she's doing a fellowship in sports medicine. Kyle Delbar was the resident director of admin. And he ultimately ended up getting a job with a Democratic group in Colorado, really competitive markets. And he said, the reason he got in there is because they were looking for somebody with an admin focus, and his resume was pretty robust. So everybody kind of took different paths and got to pretty incredible places. And that's part of our, one of our goals. And then the last thing, and probably the most important thing, is diversity and inclusion. And without kind of spending a ton of time talking about it, basically we believe that diversity is strength. And one of our biggest strengths at Christ is our very diverse patient population. And we want residents and attendings who kind of reflect that population, because we think that's the best way to provide care. And frankly, it's the best way to train physicians to be, good humans and empathetic providers. And so we've got Tammy here, who helps run our social EM curriculum throughout the year, the lecture series. This is some of our residents and attendings volunteering at the Race for Gun Violence last year. They were manning the CPR tent. And down here in the corner is Melly, one of our grads from last year at SNMA, where least level our PD goes every year, just to talk about emergency medicine in the program as well. So those are our 4 key beliefs. And I'm just going to buzz through a couple of slides here, just tell you a little info about the program, especially if you're not super familiar. And so when we ask people what the best thing about Christ is, and if you followed anything online, the answer is always the people. And people say the residents, the patients, the faculty, the people in general. And so our patients, like I said, are really unique. And we'll look at a map actually of Chicago in just a second. And part of it is the location. Part of it is, we live in an area that is largely under or uninsured. A great deal of ethnic, religious diversity, and it's busy. And so we see about 115,000 patients a year. We'll be close to that even with COVID, which is pretty crazy. Our admission rate's about 30%, which is pretty high. These people are sick. 32% of those are pediatrics, so you're seeing a high peds volume. And there are over 4,000 level 1 trauma activations per year. And so those aren't like car accidents. Those are level 1, the sickest of the sickest traumas, which is something really unique. In terms of diversity, what we mean by that in our patient population is kind of everything. That could be, like I said, creed, color, sexuality, whatever it may be. And so when you look at the breakdown of our patient population, it's almost a perfect split of like insurance status. So we're like 1/3 Medicare, 1/3 Medicaid, 1/3 privately insured. And so it gives you sort of this whole kind of range of backgrounds, and it prepares you for wherever it may be that you go in your career afterwards. It's an incredible patient population. And I think even more than most emergency departments, it can be really rewarding to care for our patients. I throw these slides in. These are actually from the trauma portion of our talk, which I won't go through all of this, but it's a map of the city of Chicago. And there's a dividing line in the middle there of what people traditionally call the north side and the south side. This was actually, we put this in 2 years ago. So University of Chicago has opened in 2018 as a level 1 trauma center, which is great. Because if you look at this line, you're looking at the density of traumas, and most of them tend to be on the south side. And you'll notice there's not a whole lot of hospitals down here. And so we are right across the street from Chicago, but we draw largely from this patient population, especially when it comes to trauma. And then we get also this very diverse population of suburbs to the left. And so you get this really cool mix surrounding the hospital. U of C opened, which has been really helpful because the patients here needed quicker access to care. And all in all, for everybody, that was a really good thing. There needs to be more dots south of that line, And so these are our numbers from the most recent data from the American College of Surgeons, and this is the number of level 1 trauma activations at level 1 trauma centers across the country. And this is us on the far right over here. We were right around 5,000. And then you saw that number after U of C opened, we moved to about 4,300. So that moves us just slightly over to here, basically one of the busiest centers in the country, even with that opening. And so there's no shortage on procedures and exposure to those sorts of things. The residents are also extremely important people in this program. They're goofballs. There's a picture of some of them. And this is from one of our previous retreats pre-COVID, when we could go to the beach and hang without social distancing. And we're looking forward to doing that again. This is numbers from 2019. I've got to crunch the current ones, but the breakdown of our residents is 39% of them were women. There's a mix of partnered and single, a couple with children, even more now with our interns coming in. 27 different medical schools, 61 of them came from outside the state of Illinois. And the one kind of constant is that they become friends for life. So you're seeing a group of our recent grads here out hiking together, climbing mountains. Here they are at one of their weddings. And then this was when Elise Hart, one of our former chiefs, was pregnant and having her baby shower downtown. And then the last group of people is our faculty. And this is a pretty kind of diverse group as well. You know, people trained in every specialty: toxicology, critical care, ultrasound, you name it, they're here. And so you're looking at the residency leadership team here, the APDs and the PD, Elise. This is Harwood, who Shola and Braden know well. Harwood was the first program director at Christ. He still works there. I think he's there for the epic go live with me on Sunday. So we've had 3 program directors in the history of the program: Harwood, Gerzatis, and now Lovell, and they all work full-time on staff, which tells you something about their commitment to the program. We've been around since 1977, so that's pretty incredible. This is Trushar. He's our head of ED Ops. I just like this picture because he's like carrying a million things over here, and it cracks me up. The faculty, 50% of them are women, 43% trained outside of Christ, and kind of the one constant there is that their number one priority is always teaching. And there's a great sense of camaraderie among both the attendings and the residents. This is a attending resident softball game. Actually, I was a resident that year, and we beat them pretty bad. This is tailgating before a Bears game. There's a Bears game tonight, so we'll get you guys out of here on time. I know you're all going to want to watch that. And then bottom right here is at ACEP surfing together. And so that brings us to our panel today and our panelists. And I'm actually going to have you guys introduce yourselves instead of me, because I've been talking too much already. So if you guys could just tell us like kind of where you're from. Oops, I'll let a couple more people in one sec. Tell us kind of where you're from, maybe where you went to med school and where you're at now. So our panelists, Shola, Braden, and then Bobby, one of my classmates who couldn't make it. I was just telling them before we started that Bobby just had twins. But I promised him I'd put a picture up here. This was one of my favorite things we did during residency, is when Texas played Notre Dame and Notre Dame won, for those of you who maybe remember that. But Braden, I'll let you go first, and Shola, we'll let you go second.
Yeah. I just found out that Roberto had twins, and I actually had twins 5 weeks ago. So trying to catch up on sleep. But I'm from Utah originally. I went to New York Medical College for med school, and went to Advocate Christ for residency. After that, moved down to Texas. I'm live in Houston right now and work in one of the suburbs, which is Sugar Land. The big things that drew me to Texas, I really have no connections down here. After I graduated, I applied to Utah, I applied to Chicago, I went down to Texas, and I got offers at every job that I applied to. Just, it kind of goes with the Christ DM name, which is a little bit strange, because when I was initially applying to Chicago programs, I was like, what is Advocate Christ? I'm like, I guess I'll just, pay the extra, what was it, like $75 back then, and apply to this one. And I didn't know much about the program, and from the before medical student kind of standpoint, and looking at the program versus after, the program that everybody in the EM field really knows about, even down in Texas and Houston. That's kind of what got me my job here, is the program's just got an excellent reputation. Prepares you really well for all of that. But that's kind of my story right now.
Braden, you're not that old, but what's your official title down there now?
I'm the assistant medical director.
There you go, rising star.
Yeah, my boss is threatening to quit and make me the medical director, which I hope he postpones for several years.
Wait till the pandemic's over.
Yeah, exactly.
And then Shola, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, hey guys, I'm Shola Balagan, class of 2015. I'm originally from Chicago, born and raised on the north side of Chicago. I'm actually from the city of Chicago, not the suburbs.
That feels like a personal shot.
Sometimes you gotta make it known. So I moved to Dallas. My husband's job relocated him out here. So that's how I ended up in Dallas. I didn't know anything about Dallas other than, my husband had an office out here, or his company had an office out here. But I'm really glad we made the move out here. Like Braden was saying, you know, Christ has a really great reputation and our grads are everywhere, including the DFW area. And so when I applied to Dallas positions, it was extremely easy to get a job out here. There was a former grad, Greg Roslin, who was also a physician in the group that I'm in now. And you know, the CMO of the group who interviewed me was very familiar with Greg and had nothing but great things to say, and was like, hey, you know, after literally 2 minutes of the interview, he was like, I don't really need to know much more. You know, I'm familiar with Christ and I know that you'll be a great addition to the team. So the rest is history. I am super grateful for my experience at Christ. It's funny because the primary reason I chose Christ was because when I rotated through the ER, I don't know if Braden or Saroni, if you guys know Brad Cutco, he's a former grad, but he was one of the residents that I worked with, and he let me do a chest tube by myself. And so I thought that was pretty telling of how residency was going to be. And so that was, I would say that was probably like number one or two in terms of reasons why I decided to go to Christ. And it was an amazing experience, and it got me to where I am now. So that's that.
Brad and his wife just had a baby also last week, so looking forward to.
That's right.
Christ,
I follow her on Instagram. Super cute.
The Christ class of 2037 or whatever is going to be just stacked.
Right, I know.
And Shirley, not to over echo it, but I think you're saying, what a message that we've driven home in the past, which is that the program's been around since 1977, and really the greatest like recruiting tool when it comes time for jobs or fellowship or whatever is sort of the people who have gone before you. And so when we talk about, we list number one, the number one goal is being, training great clinicians, because wherever you go, if the last Christ grad was an awesome clinician, then people will hire you. And so it happens at groups like yours with Roslyn. And we were talking about with all of our recent residents going into crit care, it was like, Baronis went out to Stanford, and then Natalie Tett went and followed him there. Rachel Kadar went to Northwestern, and then Jenny Dank went, and now Matt Aronson, one of our seniors, is going. So, and Braden's cat's making an appearance.
Yeah, he sure is.
The last intro we're going to do is I've got two of our interns, Maha and Tyler, on here from Texas. Will you guys just give them a hi and tell them like where you're from and kind of where you went to school and stuff? Maha, you go first.
Okay. Hi guys, I'm Maha. I went to McGovern, UTH. I was talking to Braden earlier, but yeah, I like grew up in Sugar Land, stayed in Houston till forever, and finally was like, I need to go somewhere else. So Chicago was that place. Yeah.
What drew you to Christ, Maha?
Yeah, so I did not rotate. So Tyler can, I think, give you guys like that like side of things. I knew I wanted to be in a big city. I think EM, big city, like that goes hand in hand for me. The fact that this is the only hospital, literally, you saw the map. I was going to explain it, but you have already seen it now. So like only hospital in this area, the kind of things that we see is very like unique. We get everything, right? There isn't other hospitals around to like take those patients or take those like, crazy things that come in. And then honestly, we've said this already, but the people, like I interviewed here, slam dunk. Like as soon as I left the interview, I was like, I don't know what's about to happen for the rest of my interviews, but this is my number one. And so that like, I knew off the bat, very grateful that I made it. But I just loved like hanging out with the people, the residents. Like you can see that the group is very close, and that's like something that is like very purposeful that the residency does. It's not just like hoping it happens, like they actually make it a point to make sure that all of the residents, the attendings, everybody's like very close. You've got a lot of support, and it was like very telling in the interview day. So.
Awesome. Thank you. And then Tyler, how about you?
Yeah, so I actually went to medical school right across the street from Maha at Baylor College of Medicine. And my path was a little bit different. So I actually did rotate at Christ. And kind of like a lot of what everyone else has already mentioned, just the opportunities you get as a rotator there just really showed me how strong the program was and what level of training you get. So, I came there just expecting to see a lot of patients, hopefully get my foot in the door, but I left like having done like 2 or 3 intubations, helping with a chest tube. Just like was blown away by the opportunities that these residents were giving away and happy to let me participate in. So, but yeah, so other than that, I did grow up in Texas as well. I grew up in a town in East Texas called Longview, which is about 2 hours east of Dallas. My wife actually grew up in Austin, and then we met at Texas A&M for undergrad. Got married, moved to Houston, and then I, kind of like some other people have said, I had never heard of Christ before. I had a 4th-year student when I was a 3rd year, like looking at programs to apply to, that had told me that, hey, like I was born at this hospital. I heard they have a great emergency medicine program. Why don't you give it a shot? So just sent in an application for a rotation and just absolutely loved it. Like when I left my away rotation, I was kind of like Maha said, like I left the rotation and went back to Texas, pretty sure that was going to be my number 1 choice. And I'm super glad it was.
Thank you. Also, Tyler, a cool apartment. You got the exposed brick and stuff. That's very Chicago of you in the background.
Yeah, thanks. I last time I was on a Zoom call like this, I had like 3 or 4 people comment on it as well. So
pretty sick.
I'm loving it here.
I've got, I'm going to open it up to questions now, and I had a couple of people send them in ahead of time, and I've done a couple of these now, and sometimes it's a little bit easier kind of running point guard. So if you don't want to butt in, feel free to send a message either to me or to the group, and we can try and get through them all, or just go ahead and shout them out, which is fine too. So one of the questions people asked was, there's a lot of programs in Chicago. What's different about Christ than the other programs? And so that's a really good question. We talk about, one of the cool things about training in Chicago is there's actually really good like camaraderie amongst the programs themselves. And so we do things like Simtastic every year where we all get together. I'm working on a manuscript from a research project we just did right now with every other program in Chicago. So that part's really cool. The hard part is sometimes telling the difference between all of them, especially when you're out of state. And so I'm going to turn that to Shola or Braden, maybe, if you tell them like, what was it that drew you specifically to Christ as opposed to the other Chicago programs, or what's unique about the training there?
Well, for me, I rotated through a couple of the ER programs in Chicago. Christ, I rotated through County and then also at Northwestern. And the thing that stood out about Christ, again, in addition to the experience that I had just with each individual resident and them kind of, what someone alluded to earlier, kind of giving up the opportunity to do procedures or to have certain experiences that are kind of few and far in between. That, and then also the fact that, I always thought that the camaraderie was very evident. Everyone got along, not just residents with each other, but also, with the attendings. And then the thing that stood out to me a lot was, and you'll see this as an attending, maybe you'll see it as a resident too, but oftentimes there can sometimes be tension with other departments within the hospital, like, with surgery or with internal medicine or whatnot. And maybe that's something that I've just kind of experienced as an attending and, where I am now. But I never, I never saw or experienced any of that at Christ. I thought it was really cool that the ER residents hung out with internal medicine residents, as well as with surgery residents and the peds residents too. And so that I thought was extremely unique to Christ. I didn't see that with other programs. And so I would say that that's something that definitely drew me to that program.
Yeah, I did a rotation at University of Chicago. You know, there's a lot of great programs in Chicago. There's obviously one that's a little bit better. But you know, there's a few things, especially kind of looking back on it, that you know, once you transition to an attending, because there's really two huge steps in you know, this path of medicine, and the first one is you know, from a medical student to a resident, and that's a huge leap, and you know, it's a really hard thing to do, and it's stressful. And kind of the second part of that is going from a resident to an attending. You know, and it doesn't matter how prepared you are, it's just a stressful experience. And it's interesting looking back and kind of looking at how the training from Christ prepared you for all of that. You know, especially looking at other residents who have graduated from other programs that I've seen come through, and how comfortable and confident they are with their decision making, and you know, taking ownership of their patients. And that's one of the things that Christ really pushed you to. You know, I still kind of remember this. I don't really remember when it happened, but in my residency, I kind of went from this transition point of going up to my attending and saying, hey, like, I'm thinking about, you know, this, is this okay? Like, is this all right? To, you know, doing what I thought was best for my patient, making my own decisions. You know, and then at the end of that saying, hey, this is what I did with my patient. Are you all right with that? And, you know, making those decisions on your own, and having different clinicians, the kind of one-to-one, you know, experience that you get with working with different attendings, kind of helps facilitate that, because every place you go to, you know, there are a lot of amazing attendings. There's always people that you like to work with more than others. For example, I'm sure Cerrone is probably a dreaded attending to work with. And I'm sure you'll learn a lot of things not to do when you work with him. But you, I'm in all honesty, just kidding. You're excellent. But yeah, you kind of work with people who, you know, have a style that you want to use, and you can take those things into your own practice, and then you know, have people that do things a different way, that you say, hey, you know, there's a different way that I would have done this, but I can appreciate, you know, different perspectives. And Christ really gives you that opportunity to kind of see things from a lot of different points of views, from a lot of different ER physicians, and not just that sort of hierarchy of reporting to your chief resident and then reporting to who's reporting to somebody else. You know, so that's kind of why, you know, Christ in my mind, and some of that's retrospective, as opposed to why I chose it in the first place, which again was mostly after meeting the people and falling in love with the program, and being you know, it's in one place. It's just you kind of get everything all in one place, which is you know, hard to come by in the ER world.
I'll add kind of my last point too, because it's hard not to say something there. But I always, when I went on interviews, I always looked around at the ED when I would show up there. And so, you know, you show up at 7 a.m. or whenever they start at a program, and some of them are like pretty empty. And then when applicants show up at Christ on, you know, Tuesday morning, 7 a.m. and like the hallways are just filled, people either look at that and run away, or they flock towards it. And so we kind of want the residents who are really attracted to that, right? One of our attendings likes to say, you want to see the craziest shit while you're an attending, while you're a resident, not while you're an attending, right? You want to see it there first. So that was one thing. That was a big thing for me. And then I similar to you guys, I rotated at other programs in Chicago when I was a student. And what I found out along the way there, and I say this a lot, is I thought I was really attracted to a county population. But I liked that Christ felt like that population, but in a hospital that functioned, like an enormous community hospital. And so, I think I was able to prepare better for like attending life in a hospital that functioned a little bit differently than perhaps a county system would. So that was a draw for me.
Yeah, just to kind of add to that too, the learning or the teaching that you get from the OGs at Christ, like Harwood and Lambert and Motney, or I don't even know if Motney's still there, but and then like, is Ted still there, Ted Turney?
Teddy's gone, but Motsy's still there.
Oh, okay, yeah. As a rotating student, I was pretty impressed with, especially compared to the other places that I rotated, how much time they actually took to teach students. Oftentimes students get overlooked, especially if you're not even working with a particular attending. But I would be on shift with, obviously a resident, and then there's other residents working with one-on-one with an attending. And the person that I was, oftentimes Harwood or whoever wouldn't even be working with me and would take the time to like go over an EKG or something. And I thought that was pretty cool. And that was something that I didn't experience at other rotations. So that definitely drove me towards Christ for sure.
This next question made me laugh a little bit, but it probably makes me cry a little bit on the inside. But one of the students who I think is looking to watch later said that out where they live, most of what you hear about Chicago is bad. And they wanted to know what it was like living in Chicago. And if those of you guys who are gone missed it, and for maybe Maha or Tyler, what's your favorite thing about being there now?
I can answer this. So I think, both my wife and I, we're from relatively small towns. We never lived in a big city. And I know I can speak for my wife, especially was nervous about moving to a place like this and literally living downtown in the city. We're actually currently in Streeterville, which is one of the neighborhoods, right smack in the middle of the city. But what I'll say is that we feel very comfortable walking around, and we really love the fact that we're able to walk to the grocery store, to walk to do really anything. The only time I'm really using my car is to drive to the hospital itself. So it's been a really great experience. I feel like we get outside a lot more. We live right near the lakefront trail, which has been awesome for just running, taking the dog out, things like that. It's just a really happy place to live, honestly. We've loved it so far.
Braden or Shola, what do you guys miss the most?
Well, Chicago is home for me. So, Chicago gets a bad rap, but I mean, just like any other city, any other large city, there are areas that are a little rougher than others. And, what you hear in the news is just an exaggerated, form of, what is actually happening in the city. I mean, again, like any other large city, we have our issues when it comes to, whatever violence and whatnot, but it's no different than, New Orleans or wherever else. I grew up on the north side of Chicago, and Rogers Park. And then during residency, I lived in the South Loop. And, I always felt safe. I always, it's still I'm still getting used to not, or having to drive my car here in Dallas, because I was always comfortable taking public transportation when I was in Chicago. Again, it's like living in any large city. So I don't know why we get such a bad rap. Well, I know why.
I know why the answer to that is, but
I mean, that's a blessing. That's a blessing and a curse, though. It's almost like a little badge of pride. No patient ever questions me when I tell them I trained in the South Side of Chicago for emergency medicine. That's it's one of those things. Chicago unfortunately, I think is a very, segregated city in certain parts. And, there's bad areas and there's good areas. And, there's most of those areas that we live and stay and hang out in are perfectly safe. And then there's those areas that unfortunately aren't so much, which is kind of going back to the slide that you posted, looking at the areas that have higher rates of homicide and things like that are in the South Side that are, kind of what draws us to train there in the first place. But I never felt, I lived in Wicker Park for 4 years. My brother still lives up there. My mom just actually moved down here when the twins came. So I still have a lot of family in Chicago, still love the city. I like Houston a lot. I love Chicago. It's an amazing city. I feel like if, I could have this job in that I have down here in Chicago, as opposed to down in Houston, I would take it in a heartbeat. But it's out of, I lived in, again, New York City, Houston, and Chicago, and Chicago's always been my favorite city.
Yeah, I think to Shola's point, I think we all know why we get a bad rap, and there's certain leaders in this world who want us to have a bad rap, and that's okay. But Brayden, I think you nailed it, right? So it's unfortunate. It's a city of segregated neighborhoods, and that's a bad thing when it comes to education and income equality and a variety of other issues. But I think, like we said, that's kind of part of the beauty of Christ is we're in this location where we draw from like a really diverse group of those neighborhoods and then the suburbs as well. Right. And so that's, I think our most common languages are English, and then it's Polish, Arabic, and then Spanish, which is just a very interesting mix, right? It's not something that most people are used to. And then similarly, like when it comes time for like where you want to live, we've got a lot of residents who have families, and it's great for them because they can find affordable living in the suburbs rather than downtown. And so we're in this unique location where people can live in Wicker Park or Streeterville or wherever. I lived in the South Loop the whole time there. But we've got several residents with a bunch of kids who are really happy in the surrounding suburbs as well. So that part's really cool, I think. I think Chicago gets a bad rap because of the weather, and I think our weather's terrible for like 3 months of the year, and the rest of the year it's either beautiful or not quite that bad. But I think underrated food city. I think like the West Loop is one of the greatest food neighborhoods on earth right now. I think we're one of the greatest sports cities in the world. When it comes to shows and music, everything like that, it's all here. So those are part of the reasons why I really loved living downtown. But in the spirit of getting people out on time, because we're supposed to end at 7:45, plus we got a Bear game to watch. We always wrap up. Our theme for the year is like the ACMC difference. And so we always ask, what's that one thing that you loved the most or missed the most about Christ? And so a lot of people say the people, but we want to be more specific with it. And so for me, I would say it was my classmates. A lot of them are all over the country now, Texas, East Coast, West Coast. But that was like the tightest group of friends I've ever had. When you see some shit together, it kind of binds you. So that's the thing that I miss the most, is having my classmates around me all the time. Brayden, you can go.
Yeah, I think there's kind of two things. I completely residency group. We still have a residency text thread, and we text every week. Somebody's saying, "Oh my gosh, like this crazy thing happened to me this week," or so and so had a baby, or whatever it is. That camaraderie kind of goes with you. I keep in touch with them more than I do, my friends from college or high school or any of those. So it's definitely a lifelong bond that you kind of make with people. The other, kind of going along with the people too, people like Elise Level and the attendings that I miss. And I think that I look back at some of those attendings and kind of the attributes that they had that made them great physicians. And those are still the things that I think about that I want to, instill in my own practice, to make you a better person and make you a better practitioner. Because there's a lot of this that's about medicine, but it's also about compassion and being a good provider and treating people the right way, and it's not all just about what you know. It's about how you treat people, and Christ is kind of the place to learn all that.
Shola, we'll let you close us out. The thing you missed the
Sure.
most.
Kind of the same, my co-residents. I don't really talk to them as much as as you, Braden, as much as it sounds like you do, but I do miss, you know, just kind of trudging along and, you know, going through challenging times with them. I can't think of any group of people that I would have rather gone through residency with. They got me through some really tough times. But mostly, honestly, I really miss having like those like overnight shifts with like Ted or with like, you know, Nanini or or a couple other people. Just like I really had some strong bonds with some of the attendings at Christ, and you know, they really made my time there, you know, special. And you know, I guess I also just miss home too. I miss being in Chicago. Oh, you know, the other thing I thought of when you asked the question was the patients. I work in a couple of facilities here in Dallas, and you know, it's the patient population is diverse, and you know, I love my patients, but I don't know, there was just something about the patients at Christ. Not just the diversity of patients, whether it's socioeconomic background, what kind of insurance they had, what color, whatever. There was just a level of gratitude, and you know, they were just always grateful. And maybe I got lucky, but I always had I always had great experiences with the patients. I have stories for days, just because patients were so comfortable talking to me, and you know, and vice versa. And you know, I just really enjoyed that bond that I had with the patients too. And I don't know if it was just the patient population at Christ, or if it was a Chicago thing or what. And in contrast to being here in the DFW area, maybe the people are just different. I don't know, but I miss the patients for sure.
Shola, I grew up like Northwest Burbs by O'Hare, and I like, it's hard for me to imagine not practicing on the South Side now for that same reason. Like,
Right.
there's
Yeah.
something about Southsiders, like they're hardworking. They're no bullshit, and they are the vast majority of the time they're really grateful. So it makes for a really like fulfilling experience, I think, even now.
For sure.
I thank all you guys for your time. The students, the residents, our grads, thanks so much. If anybody has questions afterwards, you can feel free to shoot me an email. We'll post this video up on the blog and on Twitter and stuff, but we can always get you in touch with other panelists and stuff too if you've got specific questions.